The crystal spires of the Zephyrian capital gleamed under the twin suns, but Queen Lyrelai felt only darkness in her heart. The war was over. 3 years of brutal conflict across 17 star systems had finally ended, with humanity's surrender. The human fleets lay broken, their worlds occupied, their resistance crushed. Yet as she stood in her throne room overlooking the conquered galaxy, victory tasted like ash. Her sister Kaylin should have been here to share this moment. Sweet, brave Kaylin, who had volunteered to lead the assault on the human stronghold of Terra Prime. The battle had been fierce, lasting 6 days as human defenders fought with desperate fury. When the orbital bombardment finally ceased and Zephyrian forces landed, they found only ruins and corpses. Among them, Kaylin's mangled body, barely recognizable beneath the twisted metal that had crushed her. Lyrelai's forearms trembled as she held the ceremonial victory chalice. The other Zephyrian nobles watched her with expectant eyes, waiting for her to speak to celebrate their triumph. Instead, she thought of Kaylin's laughter, how her sister's blue-scaled face would light up when she spoke of exploring distant worlds. Now those dreams lay buried beneath the rubble of a human world. The human prisoners were being processed in the lower chambers, thousands of them, dirty and defeated, their strange pale skin and primitive appearance making them seem almost pitiful. Intelligence reports suggested they were a young species, barely 3 centuries into space travel. Their weapons were crude, their ships slow, their tactics predictable. Yet they had fought with a savagery that surprised even the battle-hardened Zephyrians. Captain Vex approached the throne, his crimson scales darkened with exhaustion. He knelt before Lyrelai, offering her a data tablet containing the final casualty reports. The numbers were staggering. Nearly 2 million Zephyrian soldiers dead, countless more wounded. The humans had made them pay for every inch of space, every planet, every moon. Your Majesty. Vex's voice was hoarse from months of giving orders. The human leadership requests an audience. They claim to have important information about the final battle at Terra Prime. Lyrelai's grip tightened on the chalice. What could the defeated humans possibly tell her that she didn't already know? Their world was glass, their fleet scattered debris, their resistance broken. Kaylin was dead, and nothing they said would bring her back. But something in Vex's tone made her pause. The captain was a veteran of dozens of campaigns, not easily shaken. Yet now his usual confidence seemed strained, as if he carried knowledge that disturbed him. "Send them up," she commanded, her voice echoing through the crystal chamber. "But keep the guards close. These humans have proven themselves capable of desperate acts." As the massive doors slid open, a small group of humans entered under heavy guard. Their leader was a female, her brown hair streaked with gray, wearing the tattered remains of what must have once been a military uniform. Unlike the broken prisoners in the cells below, this one walked with her head high, meeting Lyrelai's gaze without flinching. The woman stopped before the throne and performed what Lyrelai recognized as a human gesture of respect, a slight bow of the head. When she spoke, her voice was steady despite the circumstances. "Your Majesty, I am Admiral Sarah Chen, former commander of the Terra Prime Defense Force. I come not to beg for mercy, but to tell you a truth that you deserve to know." Lyrelai leaned forward, her golden eyes narrowing. "Speak quickly, human. My patience for your species died with my sister." Admiral Chen's expression softened slightly. "That's exactly what I need to tell you about. Your sister didn't die the way you think she did." The throne room fell silent. Even the guards seemed to hold their breath. Lyrelai felt something cold settle in her stomach, a dread that had nothing to do with grief and everything to do with terrible possibility. "Explain yourself," she whispered. Chen reached slowly into her pocket, moving carefully to avoid startling the guards. She withdrew a small device that projected a holographic image into the air between them. The image showed a section of Terra Prime's underground bunkers, medical facilities carved deep into the planet's crust. "Your sister was badly injured in the initial assault, yes, but she wasn't killed by falling debris or human weapons. We found her trapped in the ruins of our eastern defensive wall, barely alive. Our medics, they tried to save her." The hologram shifted, showing medical equipment, human doctors working frantically over a form that was unmistakably Zephyrian. Lyrelai's breath caught in her throat as she recognized the distinctive blue scaling, the elegant bone structure of her sister's face. "She lived for 3 days in our medical bay," Chen continued. Our doctors worked around the clock, using every technique they knew to stabilize her injuries. She was conscious most of the time, asking about her people, worried about the war continuing. Lirelai stood abruptly, the chalice clattering to the floor. You lie. We found her body. We brought her home. You found a body, yes, but by the time you reached that section, she had already been moved to our main medical facility. The body you recovered, Chen hesitated, then pressed on. It was one of our doctors, Dr. Elizabeth Martinez. She had been caught in the same collapse that injured your sister. We didn't have time to retrieve her body when we evacuated. The implications hit Lirelai like a physical blow. If this human spoke the truth, then everything she believed about Kaylin's death was wrong. Her sister hadn't died immediately in the battle. She had lived, been cared for by the very enemies they had come to destroy. Where is she now? Lirelai's voice was barely audible. Admiral Chen's shoulders sagged slightly. The medical facility was hit by your final orbital strike. We were trying to evacuate the wounded when the bombardment began. Your sister, she insisted the human patients be moved first. She said it was what a true leader would do. The hologram changed again, showing the final moments before the bombardment. There was Kaylin, supported by human medics, directing the evacuation of wounded humans while Zephyrian ships rained death from above. She died trying to save the people who had been trying to save her. Chen finished quietly. I thought you should know that your sister died as a hero, not just to your people but to mine as well. Lirelai sank back onto her throne, her mind reeling. Everything she thought she knew about the war's end, about her sister's death, about humanity itself, crumbled around her. The humans hadn't just been savage defenders fighting for their survival. They had shown mercy to their enemies even in their darkest hour. The silence in the throne room stretched like a taut wire. Lirelai stared at the holographic display, watching her sister's final moments play out in painful detail. Kaylin moved slowly but deliberately, her blue scales dulled with injury and exhaustion, yet her voice remained strong as she coordinated the evacuation of human wounded. Show me more, Lirelai commanded, her voice cracking slightly. Admiral Chen manipulated the device and new images appeared. Security footage from the medical bay showed Kaylin lying on a human medical table surrounded by doctors who worked with intense focus. The Zephyrian princess was conscious, speaking with the medical staff despite her obvious pain. We don't have translation software for this footage, Chen explained. But our linguist, Dr. Sarah Kim, was present during most of these conversations. She learned some basic Zephyrian phrases to communicate with your sister. The hologram shifted to show a young human woman with dark hair sitting beside Kaylin's medical bed. The woman held a tablet pointing to symbols while Kaylin responded with careful pronunciation of human words. Even through the static of the projection, Lirelai could see her sister's natural curiosity, the same intellectual hunger that had driven her to study alien cultures since childhood. Captain Vex stepped forward, his scarred face twisted with confusion. Your Majesty, this could be elaborate deception. Humans are known for their capacity to lie. Admiral Chen turned to face him directly. Captain, with respect, what purpose would deception serve now? Your people have won. Our worlds are conquered, our fleets destroyed. We gain nothing by lying about this. Another hologram appeared, showing Kaylin sitting up in the medical bed, engaged in animated conversation with human staff. Someone had brought her what appeared to be human books and star charts. Even injured and far from home, she was learning about her captor's culture with genuine fascination. She asked about Earth. Admiral Chen continued. About our history, our art, our music. Dr. Martinez spent hours showing her recordings of human classical compositions. Your sister said she had never heard anything like them before. Lirelai remembered how Kaylin had always been drawn to alien music, collecting recordings from dozens of species they had encountered in their expansion across the galaxy. The idea that she had discovered something new and beautiful in her final days brought both comfort and deeper anguish. There's something else you need to see, Admiral Chen said quietly. She activated another file, and the projection changed to show Kaylin speaking directly to a recording device. The image quality was poor, clearly recorded in haste, but her sister's words were unmistakable. This is Princess Kaylin of the Zephyrian Empire, recording what may be my final message. I want it known that the humans of Terra Prime have treated me with honor and kindness despite the war between our peoples. Their medical staff worked tirelessly to preserve my life, asking nothing in return. If I do not survive my injuries, I want my sister, Queen Lorelei, to know that these humans are not the monsters our propaganda has made them seem." Lorelei felt her carefully maintained composure begin to crack. Hearing Kaylin's voice again, seeing her sister's familiar gestures and expressions was almost unbearable. But the content of the message shattered something deeper within her understanding of the war itself. Kaylin's recorded image continued. "The human doctor. Martinez told me about their concept of the Hippocratic Oath, a promise to heal regardless of politics or enmity. She said that to them I was not an enemy princess, but simply someone in need of medical care. This philosophy is remarkable, Lorelei. Perhaps there is something we can learn from these people." The recording flickered and Kaylin winced in pain before continuing. "I have seen their art, heard their music, learned of their history. They are young as a species, yes, but they possess something we have lost in our centuries of expansion and conquest. They remember how to find beauty even in the darkest times. They have not forgotten how to hope." Admiral Chen paused the playback. She recorded this the day before the final bombardment. She wanted to make sure someone would tell you the truth about what happened here. Lorelei stood and walked to the great windows that looked out over the capital city. Thousands of Zephyrian citizens filled the streets below, celebrating their victory with traditional songs and dances. They believed they had defeated monsters, crushed a threat to their civilization. None of them knew that those same monsters had spent their final days caring for their beloved princess. "Why are you showing me this?" Lorelei asked without turning around. "Because your sister asked us to. Because the war is over and maybe it's time for the truth. Because—" Admiral Chen hesitated, then pressed on. "Because she believed that understanding each other was the only way to prevent this from happening again." Captain Vex shifted uncomfortably. "Your Majesty, even if this is all true, it changes nothing. They are still a threat to our empire. Their rapid expansion, their aggressive colonization patterns." "Their expansion?" Admiral Chen interrupted, and for the first time anger crept into her voice. "Captain, your empire spans half the galaxy. You've conquered or vassalized over 300 species in the past millennium. We had colonized exactly 17 worlds when you declared us a threat." She activated the holographic display again, showing a star map of the local galactic region. Red markers showed Zephyrian territory, stretching across vast swaths of space. Blue markers showed human colonies, a tiny cluster of worlds in what had been considered empty space. "We weren't expanding toward your territory," Admiral Chen continued. "We were moving in the opposite direction, toward the galactic rim where we thought we could develop in peace. Your intelligence services classified us as a threat because our technology was advancing rapidly, not because we posed any immediate danger to your empire." Lorelei studied the star map, feeling a growing unease. The human colonies were indeed far from major Zephyrian worlds, positioned in a region that the Empire had previously dismissed as worthless. The threat assessment that had justified the war was based on projections and possibilities, not actual aggressive actions. "Show me the rest of Kaylin's recording," she commanded. The hologram resumed, showing her sister's final message. Kaylin's voice was weaker now, but her determination remained strong. "I have learned something important during my time here, sister. The humans do not fight because they love war. They fight because they love what they are protecting. Their families, their dreams, their freedom to choose their own path among the stars. In this, we are perhaps more alike than we are different." Kaylin paused to catch her breath before delivering her final words. "If something happens to me, do not let my death be used to justify more killing. These people deserve a chance to show what they can become. Promise me, Lorelei. Promise me that you will give them that chance." The recording ended, leaving the throne room in profound silence. Lorelei felt the weight of her sister's final request, the burden of a promise that could reshape everything she thought she knew about duty and justice. Outside, the victory celebrations continued, but now they sounded hollow to her ears. How could she celebrate when the truth was so different from what her people believed? How could she honor Kaylin's memory while keeping the promise her sister had died asking her to make? 3 days passed before Lorelei summoned the strength to visit the human detention centers. The massive complex on the outskirts of the capital housed nearly 50,000 prisoners, the remnants of humanity's military forces and civilian leadership. She had avoided this place since the war's end, unable to face the people she blamed for Kaylin's death. Now, walking through the sterile corridors with Admiral Chen as her guide, she saw them differently. The humans she passed weren't the savage monsters of wartime propaganda. They were thin from poor rations, exhausted from loss, but they maintained their dignity even in defeat. Mothers comforted crying children. Elderly humans shared their meager food with younger prisoners. Veterans helped disabled comrades move around the facility. Dr. Martinez's daughter is here somewhere, Admiral Chen mentioned as they walked. She was only 8 when the bombardment started. Dr. Martinez managed to get her to an evacuation shuttle before returning to the medical facility. Lyrelei stopped walking. The doctor who died treating my sister. She had a child? Elena Martinez. She's been asking about her mother every day since we arrived. We haven't had the heart to tell her what happened. They found the child in the facility's makeshift school area, where human teachers were conducting lessons with salvaged tablets and hand-drawn materials. Elena was a small girl with dark hair and serious brown eyes, sitting apart from the other children while drawing pictures with worn crayons. Lyrelei approached carefully, her forearms held in a non-threatening posture. The child looked up at her with curiosity rather than fear. Up close, Lyrelei could see the resemblance to the woman in the medical hologram. The same determined chin, the same intelligent eyes. You're the queen, Elena said matter-of-factly, continuing to color her drawing. Mama told me about queens. They're supposed to protect people. The simple statement hit Lyrelei harder than any accusation could have. Here was a child who had lost everything, yet still believed in the fundamental purpose of leadership. Lyrelei knelt down to the girl's level, studying the drawing spread before her. The picture showed stick figures holding hands around what might have been a planet. Some figures were blue like Zephyrians, others were brown or pink like humans. At the top, Elena had written in careful letters, "Friends forever." That's a beautiful picture, Lyrelei said softly. What gave you that idea? Elena looked up from her crayons. Mama used to say that when she was helping sick people, it didn't matter what they looked like on the outside. Everyone has the same color blood when they're hurt. She said maybe someday all the people in the galaxy could be friends. The child's innocent wisdom cut straight through all of Lyrelei's political calculations and strategic concerns. This was what Dr. Martinez had died for, not just to save Kalen's life, but to preserve the hope that understanding between species was possible. Elena, Lyrelei said carefully, your mother was very brave. She helped someone who was hurt even though it was dangerous. The girl nodded solemnly. That's what mamas do. They help people feel better. Admiral Chen had been watching this exchange with growing emotion. Now she stepped forward and knelt beside them. Elena, there's something important we need to tell you about your mother. As Chen gently explained what had happened at the medical facility, Lyrelei watched the child's face carefully. Elena listened with the serious attention that children give to news that will change their lives forever. When Chen finished, the girl was quiet for a long moment. Did the hurt person feel better because of Mama? Elena asked finally. Yes, Lyrelei replied, her voice thick with emotion. Your mother made sure she wasn't alone when it was time to say goodbye. Elena nodded, then returned to her drawing, adding more figures around the planet. Then Mama did her job right. She always said helping people was the most important thing. That evening, Lyrelei called an emergency session of the Zephyrian High Council. The 12 most senior nobles in the Empire gathered in the Crystal Chamber, their expressions ranging from curious to concerned as she shared Admiral Chen's recordings. The reaction was immediate and divided. Some council members questioned the authenticity of the evidence. Others argued that even if true, it changed nothing about humanity's potential threat to the Empire. The debate grew heated as traditional warhawks clashed with those who had always been uncomfortable with the aggressive expansion policies. Your Majesty, Duke Thorkin spoke from his seat at the council table, his ancient scarlet scales gleaming under the chamber's lights. These humans show cleverness in their deception, I grant you, but we cannot allow sentiment to cloud strategic judgment. They remain a species with dangerous growth potential. Dangerous potential, Lyrelei repeated slowly. Duke Thorkin, that describes every species we've encountered in the past 1,000 years. Should we preemptively destroy them all? If necessary for the Empire's security, yes. The bluntness of his response sent murmurs around the chamber. Even the most conservative council members seemed uncomfortable with such explicit advocacy for genocide. Duchess Velana, younger and more progressive than many of her colleagues, leaned forward in her seat. Your Majesty, if Princess Kalen's message is authentic, it represents her final wishes for how we should treat these humans. Surely that carries weight in our deliberations. The princess was injured and far from home, Duke Thorkin countered. She was not in a position to make sound strategic judgments. Her emotional response to human kindness cannot be allowed to override cold military logic. Lyrelei felt her anger rising at the dismissive tone. My sister was one of the finest strategic minds in the Empire. Her emotional response led her to recognize something that our intelligence services missed, that these humans possess a moral framework that could make them valuable allies, rather than inevitable enemies. She activated the holographic display system, showing the Council the star maps Admiral Chen had provided. Look at their expansion pattern. 17 colonies in over a century of space travel. If they were truly aggressive expansionists, they would have hundreds of worlds by now. Their technology advances rapidly, another council member pointed out. Their weapon systems improved dramatically during just 3 years of war. Because they were fighting for their survival, Lyrelei replied. Any species develops new capabilities when faced with extinction. We would do the same. The debate continued for hours, but gradually Lyrelei sensed the mood shifting. The evidence was too compelling. Kalen's final message too powerful to ignore completely. Even the most conservative members began acknowledging that perhaps their preemptive strike had been based on flawed intelligence. As the session wound down, Duke Thorkin made one final argument. Your Majesty, even accepting everything you've presented, the question remains, what do we do now? The war is over, their resistance is broken. We cannot simply reverse course and pretend none of this happened. It was a fair point, and one that Lyrelei had been wrestling with since seeing Kalen's recording. The Zephyrian Empire had invested enormous resources in this conflict. Millions had died on both sides. Public opinion had been shaped by 3 years of anti-human propaganda. Simply declaring the humans to be friends now would be impossible. But as she thought about Elena Martinez drawing pictures of different species holding hands, about Dr. Martinez dying while trying to save an enemy, about Kalen's final plea for understanding, Lyrelei began to see a path forward. We're going to do something that the Empire has never done before, she announced to the Council. We're going to admit that we made a mistake. The announcement sent shockwaves across the Zephyrian Empire. Queen Lyrelei's decision to broadcast Kalen's final message to all Imperial worlds sparked riots in some cities and profound soul-searching in others. Military commanders who had lost soldiers in the human war demanded explanations. Civilian populations who had celebrated victory just weeks before now questioned everything they had been told about the conflict. In the Imperial Palace, Lyrelei worked around the clock with a small team of advisors to develop what they were calling the Reconciliation Protocol. The plan was ambitious beyond anything the Empire had ever attempted, a complete restructuring of their relationship with humanity, and a fundamental shift in how they approached contact with new species. Admiral Chen had become an unofficial advisor to the process, spending long hours with Lyrelei and her staff to explain human culture, governance systems, and technological capabilities. The Admiral's insights were proving invaluable, but Lyrelei knew that her presence was also causing tension among the Zephyrian military leadership. Your Majesty, Captain Vex approached her private study where she was reviewing reconstruction proposals. Admiral Corinth requests an urgent audience. He says the fleet commanders are close to open revolt. Lyrelei set down her data tablet with a sigh. Admiral Corinth commanded the Empire's home defense fleet and represented the most conservative elements of the military hierarchy. She had been expecting this confrontation since announcing the Reconciliation Protocol. The Admiral arrived within the hour, his ceremonial armor gleaming with campaign honors from dozens of successful conquests. Behind him walked 3 other fleet commanders, their expressions grim. Corinth was old enough to remember the Empire's early expansion, when they had first begun absorbing other species through military conquest rather than diplomatic contact. Your Majesty, Corinth began without preamble, the fleet stands ready to serve the crown as always, but we must express our deep concerns about the current policy direction. Speak freely, Admiral. Corinth gestured toward a holographic display he had brought. We estimate that implementing your reconciliation protocol will cost the Empire over 2 trillion credits in reparations, reconstruction aid, and relocated military assets. Our own casualties in the human war exceeded 2 million personnel. Now you ask us to declare that those sacrifices were based on a mistake. The other commanders nodded agreement. Fleet Admiral Zara stepped forward, her battle-scarred face set in hard lines. "Your Majesty, we have families of the dead demanding to know why their loved ones died for nothing. Veterans who lost limbs or suffered trauma watching us negotiate with the people who caused their injuries. How do we explain this to them?" It was the question Lyrelai had been dreading because she didn't have a good answer. The truth was that millions had suffered for a war that should never have been fought. No amount of policy changes or financial reparations could bring back the dead or heal the wounded. "We explain it by ensuring it never happens again," she said finally, "by creating systems that prevent us from making the same mistakes with other species. By honoring our fallen through better judgment in the future." Admiral Corinth's expression remained skeptical. "Your Majesty, with respect, that sounds like political rhetoric. The families of the dead need more than promises about future policy improvements." Lyrelai stood and walked to the window overlooking the memorial gardens where monuments honored Zephyrian war dead. The newest section contained thousands of crystal pillars for those who had died in the human conflict, including Kalen's elaborate shrine. "Admiral, what if I told you that we could honor our dead while also preventing future conflicts? What if the human war, tragic as it was, could become the foundation for a new approach to interspecies relations that actually makes the Empire stronger?" She turned back to face the military leaders. "The humans have something we lost somewhere in our 1,000 years of expansion. They remember how to build alliances instead of just conquering enemies. They create loyalty through shared values rather than imposed authority. They also lost the war," Fleet Admiral Zara pointed out bluntly. "Their alliance building didn't save them from our fleets, didn't it?" Lyrelai activated her own holographic display, showing casualty figures from the human conflict. "We lost more personnel conquering 17 human worlds than we did in the previous 50 years of expansion combined. Their primitive tactics and desperate defense cost us more ships than any enemy we've faced." The display shifted to show economic data. "Our military spending increased by 300% during the war. We had to divert resources from dozens of other projects. 3 of our subject species attempted revolts while our attention was focused on the human front." Admiral Corinth studied the numbers with growing unease. "You're suggesting the war was a strategic failure even though we won?" "I'm suggesting that our approach to expansion has reached the point of diminishing returns. Each new conquest requires more resources to maintain control. Each subject species represents a potential rebellion waiting for the right moment. We're becoming victims of our own success." She brought up another display showing the current state of the Empire. Red zones marked areas of recent unrest. Yellow indicated species requiring significant military presence to maintain order, and green showed truly stable regions. The amount of green was disturbingly small. "The humans showed us a different model," Lyrelai continued. "They built genuine cooperation between their colonies. When we attacked, every human world contributed to the defense effort voluntarily. They didn't need occupation forces or surveillance networks to maintain unity." Fleet Admiral Zara looked thoughtful. "You're proposing we change our fundamental approach to how we build the Empire?" "I'm proposing we start thinking beyond conquest. The galaxy is vast, filled with thousands of species we haven't even contacted yet. We can either spend the next millennium fighting each one into submission, or we can learn to create genuine partnerships." The military leaders exchanged glances. Admiral Corinth spoke for the group. "Your Majesty, assuming we accept your strategic analysis, how do we implement such changes without appearing weak to our current subject species? If they see us negotiating as equals with the humans, won't that encourage rebellion?" It was an astute question, and one that went to the heart of the challenge facing the Empire. Lyrelai had spent many sleepless nights considering the same problem. How do you transition from an empire built on conquest to one based on cooperation without triggering widespread revolt? "We start with the humans," she said. "We demonstrate that partnership can be more beneficial than subjugation. If the pilot program succeeds, we gradually extend the same options to other species. Those who prefer their current status can maintain it. Those who want more autonomy can earn it through contribution to imperial prosperity." Admiral Corinth remained skeptical. "And if the humans betray this partnership? Use their freedom to rebuild their military and strike back at us?" Lyrelai thought of Elena Martinez's drawing, of Dr. Martinez dying while caring for an enemy, of Kalen's final message about finding beauty in darkness. "Admiral, If we can't trust a species that showed mercy to our princess in their darkest hour, then we can't trust anyone. And an empire that trusts no one is doomed to eventual collapse under the weight of its own paranoia. The room fell silent as the military leaders considered her words. Finally, Admiral Corinth straightened to attention. Your Majesty, the fleet will support your decision, but we request permission to maintain enhanced readiness protocols during the initial phases of this experiment. Granted, but Admiral, I want you to personally oversee the military aspects of human reconstruction. See their capabilities firsthand. Judge for yourself whether they represent a threat or an opportunity. As the military leaders filed out, Lyrelai felt the weight of the Empire's future settling on her shoulders. She was about to attempt something that no galactic power had ever tried, voluntarily giving up control in the hope of gaining something more valuable. The next few months would determine whether her sister's final message would reshape the galaxy, or whether it would become just another noble failure buried in the archives of Imperial history. 6 months after the reconciliation protocol began, Lyrelai stood in what had once been the ruins of Terra Prime. The human homeworld surface bore terrible scars from the final bombardment, but already signs of renewal were emerging. Construction crews, both human and Zephyrian, worked side by side to rebuild the medical district where Kaylin had spent her final days. The transformation had not been easy. Initial attempts at cooperation were marked by suspicion, anger, and occasional violence. Many humans couldn't accept help from the people who had destroyed their worlds. Many Zephyrians couldn't understand why they were rebuilding what they had fought to destroy. But gradually, individual connections began forming. Human engineers impressed Zephyrian supervisors with innovative construction techniques. Zephyrian medical teams shared advanced healing technologies that could help human civilians injured in the war. Small acts of kindness built bridges where diplomatic protocols had failed. Admiral Chen approached from across the construction site. Her new role as human Zephyrian liaison coordinator, evident in the mixed uniform she wore, incorporating elements from both species' traditions. Behind her walked a group that would have been unthinkable just months ago. Human and Zephyrian children playing together while their parents worked on reconstruction projects. Your Majesty, Chen greeted her with the respectful bow that had become standard in their interactions. I wanted to show you the memorial site before the dedication ceremony. Tomorrow, they walked together through the rebuilt medical district to where a beautiful garden now grew, above the ruins of the original hospital. At its center stood a monument unlike anything in the Empire. Not a towering crystal spire celebrating victory, but a simple stone circle with water flowing continuously through carved channels. Inscribed on the stone were names from both species: Dr. Elizabeth Martinez, Princess Kaylin, and the hundreds of others who had died in the medical facility during the final bombardment. Above the names, carved in both human and Zephyrian scripts, were Kaylin's words: Everyone has the same color blood when they're hurt. The design was Elena's idea, Admiral Chen explained. She said her mother always told her that water connects everything. It falls as rain on mountains and flows to the sea, picking up pieces of everything it touches along the way. Lyrelai knelt beside the memorial fountain, watching the clear water flow over the inscribed names. Somewhere in this garden lay the exact spot where her sister had died, choosing to save human lives even as Zephyrian weapons rained destruction from above. The thought no longer brought only pain. Now it carried something else. Pride, perhaps, or hope. How is Elena adapting to her new life? Lyrelai asked, better than we expected. She's been accepted into the Imperial Academy's accelerated program for gifted children, the first human to receive such an honor. She wants to study medicine like her mother, but also xenobiology and diplomatic sciences. The irony wasn't lost on Lyrelai. The daughter of a woman who had died treating an enemy was now being educated to become a bridge between species. Perhaps that was how real change happened, not through grand proclamations or policy shifts, but through individual children growing up with broader perspectives. A commotion from the construction site drew their attention. A group of human workers had stopped their labor and were gathered around something on the ground. As Lyrelai and Chen approached, they could see the source of the disturbance: a small artifact partially buried in the rubble, apparently uncovered during excavation work. The artifact was recognizably Zephyrian in design, a personal data crystal of the type used for recording private messages or important documents. One of the human workers, a middle-aged man with calloused hands and careful eyes, held it respectfully as they approached. "We thought you should see this before we turned it over to the archive teams," he said to Lyrelei. "The crystal is cracked, but the data core appears intact." Lyrelei accepted the crystal, feeling its familiar weight in her hands. Such devices were personal items, usually carried by individuals to record important thoughts or messages for family members. She activated her portable scanner and carefully probed the crystal's contents. The scanner's display showed a single recording, dated just hours before the final bombardment. The ownership codes identified it as belonging to Princess Kaylin. Lyrelei's breath caught. This was another message from her sister, one that had been lost in the destruction until now. With trembling hands, she activated the playback function. Kaylin's image appeared in miniature above the crystal, clearly exhausted but speaking with urgent intensity. "Lyrelei, if you find this recording, it means I didn't survive what's coming. The bombardment will begin soon. We can see your ships positioning themselves in orbit. The humans are evacuating their wounded to deeper shelters, but there isn't time to move everyone." Kaylin paused, looking directly at the recording device. "I want you to know that I chose to stay. Dr. Martinez offered me a place on one of the evacuation transports, but I refused. These people showed me kindness when they had every reason for hatred. They shared their food, their medicine, their knowledge. They treated me as a person rather than an enemy." The recording flickered as explosions began in the distance. Kaylin's voice remained steady despite the chaos. "I cannot abandon them now. If these are to be my final hours, I want to spend them as our parents taught us, protecting those who cannot protect themselves, showing honor even in darkness." Tears were flowing freely down Lyrelei's face now, but she didn't look away from the recording. Around her, humans and Zephyrians alike had gathered to listen to her sister's final words. "The humans have a concept they call paying it forward," Kaylin continued. "When someone shows you kindness, you repay it not to them but to others who need help. Dr. Martinez saved my life, knowing she might never see her daughter again. I can honor that sacrifice by ensuring her people are not abandoned in their darkest hour." The recording shook as another explosion rocked the medical facility. Kaylin looked off screen, apparently responding to someone calling for help, then turned back to the device. "Lyrelei, I know you will want to avenge my death, but I beg you, don't let my loss be used to justify more killing. The humans are not our enemies. They are what we could become if we remembered how to choose compassion over conquest." A human voice called urgently from off-screen, and Kaylin nodded. "I have to go. The wounded need help moving to the lower levels. Tell our people that I died well, sister. Tell them I died believing that something beautiful could grow from the ashes of this terrible war." The recording ended abruptly as another explosion shook the facility. The small group around Lyrelei stood in profound silence, processing what they had just witnessed. A Zephyrian construction supervisor was quietly weeping. Several human workers had removed their helmets in a gesture of respect. Elena Martinez pushed through the crowd, having run over from the children's play area when she heard the commotion. The 10-year-old looked up at Lyrelei with serious brown eyes. Her mother's eyes. "Was that the princess who was with Mama?" Elena asked. Lyrelei knelt down to the child's level, still holding the precious crystal. "Yes, Elena, that was Kaylin. She wanted to make sure your mother wasn't alone." Elena nodded solemnly, then surprised everyone by taking Lyrelei's hand in both of her small ones. Then they were friends. Mama always said that real friends take care of each other, especially when things are scary. In that simple statement from a child who had lost everything, Lyrelei finally understood what her sister had been trying to tell her. The war had ended not with victory or defeat, but with the recognition that friendship was stronger than fear. Now it was up to the survivors to build something worthy of that sacrifice. 2 years had passed since the memorial dedication, and the changes across the Empire were becoming impossible to ignore. What had started as a pilot program with humanity had evolved into a fundamental transformation of how the Zephyrian Empire operated. The results were both encouraging and troubling, depending on one's perspective. Lyrelei stood in the renovated Imperial Council chamber, reviewing reports from across their territory. The traditional crystal architecture remained, but now the chamber included seating for representatives from 12 non-Zephyrian species, including 3 humans who served as advisors on interspecies relations. Admiral Chen entered the chamber, now wearing the full dress uniform of a Zephyrian admiral, the first human to achieve such rank. Behind her walked Elena Martinez, now 12 years old and already showing the analytical mind that would soon earn her early admission to the Imperial Science Academy. "Your Majesty," Admiral Chen began, "the monthly integration reports are ready for review." The holographic displays that filled the chamber told a complex story. On the positive side, economic productivity was up 23% across integrated systems. Military recruitment from allied species had reached unprecedented levels. Technological innovation had accelerated dramatically as different species shared knowledge freely. But the challenges were equally significant. 3 traditional subject species had demanded similar autonomy to what humans now enjoyed. 2 border regions had seen civil unrest as local populations questioned why they remained under direct imperial control. Most troubling, intelligence suggested that several rival galactic powers were watching the Zephyrian experiment with great interest. "The hegemony of worlds has been particularly active in our border regions," Admiral Chen reported. "They're spreading propaganda that the Empire has grown weak, that our new policies represent decline rather than evolution." Lyrelai studied the intelligence reports with growing concern. The hegemony was their oldest rival, a confederation of species bound together through economic dependence rather than military conquest. For centuries, the 2 powers had maintained an uneasy balance, neither strong enough to completely defeat the other. What does Fleet Intelligence assess as their likely next move? "They're testing our resolve, Your Majesty. Probing raids in systems where we've recently granted increased autonomy. They want to see if local populations will rally to imperial defense or welcome liberation from Zephyrian control." Elena stepped forward with the confidence she had developed through 2 years of accelerated education. "Your Majesty, may I share some observations from the youth integration programs?" Lyrelai nodded. Elena's insights had proven surprisingly valuable, offering perspectives that adult minds often missed. "We've been studying the integration process in the Academy, comparing successful and unsuccessful examples. The pattern is clear. Species that were given choices about their level of autonomy integrate successfully. Those who were forced into predetermined roles resist." She activated a smaller holographic display showing data from various integrated worlds. "The hegemony's propaganda works best in systems where people feel they don't have real options. But in regions where they can choose their own path within the Empire, loyalty actually increases." It was a perceptive analysis that aligned with Lyrelai's own observations. The key to successful integration wasn't imposing uniform policies, but offering genuine alternatives that allowed different species to find their own balance between independence and imperial membership. "Elena makes an important point," Admiral Chen added. "The hegemony's challenge isn't really military, it's ideological. They're offering freedom to species who already have it, but framing it as liberation from oppression that no longer exists." The discussion was interrupted by Captain Vex, who entered with urgent communications from the border. His expression was grim as he approached the throne. "Your Majesty, we've received a formal challenge from Hegemony, Supreme Chancellor Vorth. They demand we choose between returning to traditional imperial policies or facing consequences for our destabilizing influence on galactic civilization." Lyrelai accepted the communication crystal and reviewed its contents. The message was diplomatically phrased but essentially an ultimatum. Abandon the integration policies or face potential military action from the hegemony and its allies. "How long do we have to respond?" 30 standard days, Your Majesty." The challenge forced a decision Lyrelai had been hoping to avoid. The Empire's new approach to interspecies relations had been successful in many ways, but it had also made them vulnerable to challenges from powers that saw cooperation as weakness. "Admiral Chen, I need honest assessments from the integrated worlds. If the hegemony attacks, will our allied species fight alongside us or see this as an opportunity for independence?" "Most will stand with us, Your Majesty. The integration has created genuine bonds, not just political arrangements. But I won't lie, some regions might see a hegemony invasion as a chance to break free entirely." Elena cleared her throat politely. "Your Majesty, there might be a third option." Both adults looked at her with surprise. The girl had been following the discussion intently, but hadn't been expected to contribute to high-level strategic planning. "What do you mean, Elena?" The hegemony is challenging us because they think our new policies make us weak. But what if we showed them that cooperation makes us stronger, not weaker? Lyrelai leaned forward with interest. Explain. Elena activated the display again, showing the current military capabilities of both powers. Right now you're thinking like this is a choice between old imperial strength and new cooperative weakness. But what if it's actually a choice between isolated strength and networked power? She highlighted communication and logistics networks that had developed between integrated worlds. Look at how quickly information flows between our systems now. How efficiently resources move where they're needed. How many different species contribute unique capabilities to our defense systems? Admiral Chen was nodding with growing enthusiasm. She's right. Our response time to threats has improved dramatically. Our intelligence networks are more comprehensive. Our supply chains are more resilient. The hegemony is still thinking in terms of 20th century imperial power, Elena continued with excitement. They see hierarchy and control as strength. But we've built something they can't counter, a voluntary network where every member has reasons to defend the whole. Lyrelai felt a smile, spreading across her face as she understood what Elena was suggesting. Instead of choosing between old imperial strength and new cooperative policies, they could demonstrate that cooperation was actually a form of strength the hegemony couldn't match. Admiral Chen, I want you to coordinate with all integrated worlds, not to prepare for defensive war but to show the galaxy what networked power looks like. Your Majesty, we're going to respond to the hegemony's challenge by inviting them to compete, not in conquest but in cooperation. Let's see which approach to galactic civilization actually produces better results for the species involved. As plans began forming for what would become known as the Great Demonstration, Lyrelai felt her sister's presence strongly. Kaelin had died believing that cooperation was stronger than conquest. Now they would have the chance to prove she was right.